This is the City Sites Podcast with Larry Kutzler.
This podcast is the design of City Sites Urban Media, and our goal is to bring into focus the difference between culture and God's ideas found in His Word. To learn more, go to citysitesurbanmedia.com.
And here's the question that we kind of laid out to the elder board, is we asked, will Icon Church become a fully inclusive church for the LGBTQ community? And what we mean, we defined this as an elder board. What we mean by fully inclusive is that people from the LGBTQ community are welcome, period. Not welcome with an asterisk, not welcome in certain places, not welcome to change, but that means they can serve in any and every capacity in the church, from a greeter in the parking lot to a pastor on staff, right? So this was a big thing that we were wrestling with. And then two, would this also mean that if the conscience allowed for certain pastors, if they wanted to perform same-sex marriages, that they would be allowed to? And also, would we allow our pastors to speak about the ways they think about this and believe about this?
Kids as young as 4 are curious about how babies are made, and you're welcome to talk to them about exactly how babies are usually made. They're also very curious about birth and pregnancy, which is a great place to start the sex talks with your young kids. They love to look at pictures and books of bodies, and so that's a wonderful place to start.
This may sound really shocking, but it's not really surprising considering that international research repeatedly portrays that 0.5 up to even 3% of our male population has some form of pedophilic interest. Most of these people know that they have feelings that they should repress.
Everyone uses data today to verify a point of reference or to support a product that they're selling. Statistics also can be manipulated to say things that aren't true as well. So one has to be very careful how they use and interpret statistics. So here are a few statistics you may have to discern. 56 million babies have been aborted worldwide between 2010 and 2014. There are almost 900,000 abortions in the United States every year, and that is down about 7% since 2018. Pedophilia, the desire to have sex with children, is exploding in the United States, they say. Federal Bureau of Investigation stats show that child pornography is one of the fastest growing crimes in the U.S. In the past decade, child pornography arrests have increased 2,500%. 2/3 of sex offenders in state prisons committed offenses against children. The statistics can go on from there, but again, statistics, what do they tell us?
Chances are you know someone who has been sexually assaulted or raped. The Department of Justice says 18% of women in the United States have been raped at some point in their lifetime. 18%. That's almost 1 out of every 5 women. Or the populations of Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, Montana, Wyoming, and Utah combined. And about 2/3 of victims know their attacker. So why do only 16% of cases get reported? Well, it's complicated. Sometimes victims don't want to get the offender in trouble. Sometimes they believe police can't help. But every time, a victim is dealing with some sort of trauma. Most times we think of physical, emotional, or mental trauma. But what if I told you sexual assault victims are also hit financially? The DOJ finds that almost 50% of sexual assault survivors lose their jobs or are forced to quit.
Well, as a society, we have talked very little about how the recent pandemic virus has anything to do with God and the criteria He uses to bring judgment upon a people. Remember 2 things. Jesus said that in the last days, they will be like the days of Noah. and that's out of Matthew 24:37-39. It says, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating, drinking, and marrying, and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." Well, go back and read the story of Noah in Genesis 6, and God said this in verses 5 and 6, "And the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord relented that he even made the human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled." So God destroyed the earth. Some say, well, that was God then, and he's different today. Well, if God is different today and he relented of the justice and judgment, then why is the book of Revelation listed in the New Testament? Isn't the New Testament, according to that thinking anyway, the new God? The book of Revelation shouldn't be there because the book of Revelation is a story of God's wrath upon a world, like in Noah's day, who lived in perpetual wickedness without any regard to God's laws. Today is no different than the days of Noah. God destroyed the world because the wickedness had become out of control. Everyone knows that life in general is getting darker, not lighter. We can talk about revival and how God is on the move, and that may happen in certain selected areas of the world, but in general, the rule of what we see is more people today are being influenced by darkness than they are by light. We are accepting more practices by society that the Bible condemns. Okay, so how are we addressing these issues? Are we only complaining about the darkness, or are we moved to push it back? Well, Carter Cullen from Times Square Church in New York City said, "A new law was recently passed in Ontario, Canada."
The message that the Lord's put on my heart for this morning is called Push Back the Darkness. Some of you may or may not be aware of this, but a couple of weeks ago in the province of Ontario, Canada, a new law was passed that if your child at the age of 8 comes home from school one day and your little boy decides that he's a girl and you refuse to let that child go to school in a dress, then the government has the right now to take that child out of your home. You see, folks, you got to understand, we're living in a perilous time. We are living in an age of lawlessness that the scriptures have spoken about, a darkness that you and I never imagined would ever touch our generation. We read it in the Bible and we knew it was going to come. We knew that there would be an unspeakable lawlessness and a great falling away in the last day before Christ returns. But most of us never thought we'd ever live to see a day like this. And if you think this is bad, without God intervening, folks, I fear for what kind of a generation we're leaving for our sons and daughters ahead of us. The battle is now about Christ and his restrictions on behaviors of those who, in themselves, they want no restrictions and they want to be their own judges of what is right and wrong. This is the battle. It always has been the battle of a fallen humanity. When Satan came into the Garden of Eden, he sowed a seed of his own fallen nature into humankind, that you don't need to follow the ways of God. You can be as God in yourself, and you can determine what is right and what is wrong. And have we not fallen prey as a generation to that evil logic, may I put it that way, the casting off? This is why the heathen are raging. This is why the nations are coming together and banding together around a common cause, which is shocking to those of us who know Christ. Casting off is, let us cast off their cords from us. All of the restrictions that Christ has brought upon our behaviors, and they, as his representatives, let us stand against the Lord and against his anointed, those that have the Spirit of God on them, and let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us. That's exactly what we're facing today. That is the battle. It's not Democrat versus Republican versus Libertarian, etc., etc. It's godlessness versus Christ. That's what we are fighting in this generation.
The Gospel Coalition also printed an article called Pushing Back the Darkness. Here in part was what they said. But even as the shadow of darkness blankets our landscape, there is an ever-increasing number of embassies of the kingdom of light. That's what the church planting is all about, establishing outposts of light in a land of darkness. Pulpits again need to challenge the people of God to know that sitting in a pew on Sunday morning is not pushing back the darkness. And no matter how much is preached about how dark it is getting, there will be no stopping it by just hearing about it. I think part of the problem we face is that we know how the story ends, right? Evil reigns supreme in the last days, and it is only when Jesus comes back that that reign of terror will end. However, that's no excuse for doing nothing in the meantime. Yet, even if we are unable to stop the darkness, we must be the light for those who want to escape it. There will always be people who want to change, who know that the darkness is not healthy, but it is a curse of death. For those people, we have to be in prayer. We have to plant more outposts of truth, and we have to get the people of God off their Sunday morning pews and use their influence to create a coalition to push back the darkness in our day. It may not be easy, but we have to start somewhere. We need to talk about it amongst friends and Bible study partners. Pastors need to talk to their colleagues about it and form plans to change this virus narrative from a health issue to a sin issue. God's perspective is not a health issue. He is using this virus to wake us up. He knows health is the number one concern with most people, but his perspective on the number one human issue isn't health, it is sin. We are in a war, and that war is the propaganda about health. I know there are conspiracy theories all over the place, but let me just tell you that the Bible is not a conspiracy. God is serious about sin, and we are not. God gave us His only Son to make a way for us, and we have ignored it as a general population. That is what this is all about, getting us to revisit our lives, our faith, and the purpose for why He established the church and why many of us have become Christians. Let's use this time at home to repent from our compromise, recommit to the cause of Christ, and make His name known throughout the world.
In recent years, culture has become more influential than the church. Much of the influence is a direct attack on the Bible and the truth. City Sites Podcast is designed to bring a different point of view, and we hope you will continue to listen as we make our case. Thank you for joining us today. Every Friday, we bring you this podcast with interviews with people who are challenging the status quo of Christianity and challenging the cultural norms of our day. Please help us get the word out by sharing the link to this podcast with your online friends and family. Our website also contains other podcasters who are part of the City Sites network of communicators, all sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Our website is citysitesurbanmedia.com.
This is the City Sites Podcast Network.